There we go. And this is Wednesday Night Slides number 29. Thanks y'all for tuning in. Appreciate it. Let me find my chat feature here so I can keep track of that during the festivities. I'm going to launch the program now, and we're going to start off with airplanes and some other stuff from the Reading Air Show, the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum Air Show in Reading, Pennsylvania. That happened a couple weekends ago. Let me find my chat again here, just so anybody has any questions on the chat, I can keep track of that. There it is. All right, if you're new to Zoom, once again, if you see the pictures down the side, and you don't want them there, you can use the icons at the top of the panel there to shrink them down. And I do take questions during the show, so if you have any questions or anything, or if I'm wrong on an airplane model, or you have something to add about it, because I'm a novice at the airplanes, feel free to jump in. 2 weekends ago was the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum Air Show at the Reading Airport in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I headed out there, met up with a bunch of guys who attend a lot of Pete Laro's events. And they have all kinds of neat things there. It's an entire World War II weekend, not just airplanes, but they have reenactors all over the place. And just about every front from World War II, including the foreign fronts, Germany and Japan, are represented with reenactors. So it's right for photography. They even have an old Gulf gas station on the grounds there. And in reality, Lancaster was about 60 miles away, not 8,412 miles. But like I said, this is all cool reenactor stuff. It's just neat stuff. Cafe, spiderweb bar, flies only. And some of these buildings here on the grounds of the museum, which is right at the airport, some of these buildings are permanent buildings that are just used during the World War II weekend for reenactment. Okay, here we come to the airplanes, and here's what I don't know what I'm looking at here. If anybody wants to jump in with what we're looking at here, feel free to do so. They had lots.
If I'm not mistaken, the Americans called them Texans, and we called them Harvards.
Okay. The air show had a lot of cool airplanes, though. And like I said, I'm a novice at this. The main viewing area is from near the museum, which is across the runway from where I am. It's on the wrong side of the sun, actually. But if you've been there before, know the drill, and people I was with knew the drill. You hop on one of the shuttle buses, go to one of the outlying parking lots, parking lot number 5, and you can literally sit in grass, under trees in the shade on the proper side of the sun, right off the end of the runway. They have planes doing acrobatics. This is a B-17. And this is a really cool plane. I had never seen, I might have, I just never realized it, but it's the first time I really took notice of a B-17. It's a cool airplane. For the photographers, I was shooting at about 1/400th of a second. That was slow enough to get some blur in the props, but fast enough that tracking an airplane in my camera that's going 140 miles an hour, I could still freeze the airplane. My secret was I shot with a 300mm lens. Others were shooting with 600mm lenses. I have no idea how they kept the airplane in their field of view with that tight of a lens, Here's the photo line. I have no idea what the guy in white is shooting. He's just pointing the complete wrong direction. But I use a 300mm lens, and that was enough to put the plane in the frame somewhere, and then I could just crop down later and get it where I wanted it in the frame. Japanese Zero, I believe. And they had a few of these here, but I think only one was original. The rest reproductions. Apparently, a lot of repros popped up after the movie Tora, Tora, Tora was made. Takeoff time. Mr. Bradley, any help on this one?
B-26, I think it is.
Okay.
Mitchell bomber.
And this is the Douglas C-47.
Yep.
The Hairless Joe. There's takeoff time again. I shot over 1,000 frames at the show, and I pretty much discovered what kind of shots I do and don't like when shooting airplanes. Like I said, we're just off the end of the runway, so a lot of this stuff is right after the planes took off. They're flying fairly low, so it gave a really good angle to shoot the planes. There's our B-17 again. B-29? Yes, B-29. Okay. And a Mustang. For this shot here, I went there. Oh, I didn't clean off the dust spots. Shooting in the air show was one way to discover really fast that your camera has a dirty sensor, because it really shows up in the sky. But anyhow, for this shot here, I backed off to 1/60th of a second. Hard to keep the plane from blurring, but what it does give you is it gives you a complete disc rotation on the propellers, which is pretty cool. And they finished off the air show with the missing man formation, where 4 planes fly in formation and 1 peels off. Here's President Roosevelt. He showed up at the dance that night. He wasn't dancing because he's the president. But this reenactor here gave the Day That Will Live in Infamy speech from the stage. It was pretty cool. Then towards the evening, we went back out onto the runway. For a photo session with Mr. Laro. These planes, we had 3 planes available to us. This one here, though, developed a hydraulic leak right on as soon as they spotted it for the night shots. They couldn't fire it up. Pete arranged for the fire company to come in and soak down the runway in front of the planes to give us a reflection to work with. And they fired up the planes and got the prop spinning, and it was pretty cool. This is taken right after ignition, and the plane put out a nice little puff of smoke that really added to the shot. Any idea, Steve, what this is? Anybody?
Yeah, TBM. Oh, geez, it'll come to me. That it was a TBM torpedo bomber.
Okay.
Spectacular shots, Steve. They're amazing.
Oh, thanks. Pete had it lit from both sides. We had 5 minutes because all these airplanes are air cooled. They can't stay running on the ground for very long. We had 5 minutes to run around and do shots. They were lit from both sides. And for this shot here, I actually worked one of Pete's far lights into the shot just to add a little bit of depth and a little bit of glisten to the runway. And then the Mustang on ignition put out a real nice fire show. And we had 5 minutes to shoot the Mustang before it had to shut down.
One was called a Grumman TBM Avenger, the Grumman Avenger.
So that's the air show. Now we're going to get on to the trains here. And for our trains, we're going to head down to Virginia and West Virginia on Norfolk Southern, down into the Appalachia coal fields in the southern part of the show, this segment. And a lot of this is the land of Winston Link, where he did a lot of his night photography. We're going to start off on the Shenandoah line here up towards Front Royal, Virginia. This is in Boyce, Virginia, southbound Norfolk Southern freight heading down the Shenandoah line. The depot at Boyce now houses a railway post office museum. This was unusual because this part of Virginia doesn't see this much snow very often, but about 2 feet had fallen a couple of days before. Working our way down the Shenandoah line. This is a northbound train at Bentonville. And here's a train going through Luray, where Lake did a lot of his photography. If you look carefully, you'll see there's passenger cars behind the diesels here. This is actually a Norfolk Southern steam special. It was supposed to run with the 4501. Of course, this is all back pre-internet, so you didn't know the 4501 wasn't going to run until you got down there and it wasn't running. This is Hawksbill Creek, just south of the Luray Depot. Link did a shot here of kids playing in the water as a steam locomotive went overhead. I believe it was a Y6. But he shot from the opposite side of this shot here with the highway bridge in the photo as well. Getting down towards Shenandoah, Virginia. These shots are more or less grouped by line. I'm not going to guarantee that they're in the exact proper order geographically within those lines. This is the very last move of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus train going north to its last show, passing through Shenandoah. This is also in Shenandoah. This is a little town called Dublin. This line still has a few of the classic Norfolk and Western position light signals like you see on the right-hand side there. This is in Pulaski, just south of Pulaski, a southbound train. Back to the circus train again. This is the train going away just north of Waynesboro, Virginia. Unfortunately, the circus train on this day started off with 2 locomotives, but then those 2 locomotives had difficulty, some kind of problem, and they added 2 more engines. And then those 2 engines developed some kind of problems. They added 2 more engines. By the time it got up to northern end of its run, up around Front Royal, it had 6 engines in the lead, and you couldn't hardly see the circus train. There's just too much power up front. Hard to get a photo that showed it actually was a circus train. This is Waynesboro, Virginia, and this is the exact location where Winston Link took his very first Norfolk and Western night photo. The Norfolk and Western is the lower track. Overhead is the Chesapeake and Ohio, now the Buckingham branch. And the Union Station used to sit on the right-hand side, just above the NS locomotive. That's where it all started for Mr. Link. They had a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Link's first shot, and Norfolk Southern provided a business train and posed it in the spot. Buckingham branches kind of showed up. They heard it was going on, and they fired up their engines and came out and posed in the scene too. Rural Retreat, Virginia. Link took a famous shot here of a train going away with a person on the ground holding a lantern. The station has now been restored. It's in pretty good shape now, actually. For a while, it was looking pretty rough. And if Link can do a night shot in Rural Retreat, I guess I have to try one too. This is Vesuvius, Virginia, and that derelict building just to the left of the locomotive, that is the general store where Link shot his famous scene with the gas pumps. The gas pumps obviously are gone. They are now located in the Link Museum in Roanoke, and the interior of the store has also been relocated to the Link Museum. So just the shell is left here in Vesuvius. This is in Marion, Virginia, northbound train. And this is Abingdon, Virginia, southbound train. The building on the right, the house, that was used by the track foremen, section men back in the day. And that's been preserved as well as the depot. Another view of the station in Abingdon. This is on my list of places to try a night shot sometime. And that brings us down to Bristol, right on the Virginia-Tennessee border. The big sign in the background was erected in the 1920s, I believe. Lit up by mostly incandescent bulbs at the time. It has since been restored and now has LEDs. But before they refurbished it, I did get down there and do a couple of night shots. That was high on my list of things to do. And so I got this shot here one night. I lucked out, got 2 trains this evening. State Street is the state line. The middle of the road is the state line. Bob asked, wasn't Rural Retreat where Link recorded his famous sound recordings of the church bells and the arrival of the Pelican on Christmas Eve? And yes, that is the place. Link also, in addition to his photography, he made some awesome audio recordings. Now we're heading across Virginia, west of Lynchburg. This is at Montrose. I was a little surprised to find I didn't have very many shots of freights between Lynchburg and Roanoke, but I have tons of the 611, which I was down there chasing when I shot these. So unfortunately, all these position light signals are gone now. Here's the signals at Webster. And this is in Roanoke around 1982, maybe. Still some big Alcos sitting around the turntable here. And you got an Alco T6 in the upper left-hand corner there. Just after Norfolk Southern. So everything is still pretty much painted Norfolk and Western. This is out in the area near Shawsville, Elliston, I guess. It actually would be Elliston. And here you see the modern style of signals that have replaced the position lights. This is in Shawsville. We're now west of Roanoke, and we're climbing up Christiansburg Hill. Kevin said that last location was Singer. Okay. This is kind of cool. This was a private grade crossing. The crossing is actually at the very, very, very lower right corner of the photo. But this signal, crossing signal, appeared to have been made out of parts from Norfolk and Western position light signals. The sign says the lights are out, indicating an approaching train. So if it's lit, you're clear to cross. If you were out, you shouldn't cross. That made it so if there's a power failure, you wouldn't get a false clear. But that's like the opposite of the way most signals work. Most signals light up when a train approaches. These go out. This signal is no longer there, but it has been, I understand, preserved somewhere, but not at the Virginia Museum of Transportation. I'm not sure exactly where it wound up. This is at Arthur. We're climbing up Christiansburg Mountain still. We're getting close to Montgomery Tunnel. This is at Montgomery Tunnel, but looking the other direction from the tunnel. We're looking towards Christiansburg here at an eastbound train. And here's Montgomery Tunnel. Link did some night shots here as well. Here we see Norfolk Southern's heritage unit painted for the Savannah and Atlanta, leading the train out of Montgomery on a winter day. I've done a lot of shooting at Montgomery Tunnel over the years. Here we see the modern signals framing the train. And this is back when the color position light signals were still there. This is a night shot of several seconds long of a train coming through Montgomery Tunnel. I opened the shutter with the engine on the far end of the tunnel, which gave it that little burst of light there. Then I covered up the lens with my hand so the headlight wouldn't blow out the shot, and then uncovered again and then shot the train blurring by for several seconds. And here's Montgomery with the old signals in place. Other side of Christiansburg, we're at Vicar. At Vicar is the location of an old Norfolk and Western coaling tower. This is where the steam locomotives would stop after climbing up Christiansburg Mountain to take on more coal. All the apparatus that was used to load the coal, all the metal work is gone now, but the concrete tower still remains. And while the tower spans only 2 tracks now, at one time it spanned probably 4 tracks. This is a little bit out of sequence, I believe. I think we're on the far side of Bluefield here at Falls Mills, which we'll get back to in a minute. Yeah, this is also Falls Mills. The tracks hit the crest at Bluefield, which is right on the Virginia-West Virginia border. And then they enter West Virginia just briefly in Bluefield, duck back into Virginia just briefly again, and then get into West Virginia for good. On the lead here, actually, these are pushers, pushing a train up the hill into Bluefield from the west. We have the original Norfolk Southern, not the modern one that's out there now, but the original Norfolk Southern heritage unit on the rear of the train. And just ahead of it in the dark blue is the Norfolk and Western heritage unit. This is also at Falls Mills. This is Bluefield. This is a little bit out of sequence. So um, this is back just after Norfolk Southern took over. So there's still largely Norfolk and Western here at this point. A lot of coal at the time. You go to Bluefield Yard now, and it's empty, just barren of cars. A lot has changed up there in the last 30 years. Here we see a helper set heading back down the grade. This is on the west side of Bluefield. It's quite a show. And there's still coal coming out of the Pocahontas region, but it's not like it was back even 30 years ago. This is Cooper's. The train pops out of a tunnel on the far end of the bridge there and swings across the valley here. Also at Cooper's, this is a helper set with the rear locomotive painted for the Lehigh Valley, a little bit out of the territory it represents. At Mayberry, there's an old powerhouse there because the Virginian ran through here as well, parallel to the N&W, and the Virginian was electrified for much of the way through the mountains. So here's a powerhouse that powered the Virginian Railway at one time. Mayberry has this massive bridge going across the road and the river. And here's a going away shot of a caboose behind helpers crossing that bridge. Back when I was playing with a borrowed 500mm lens. Now we're getting into the Pocahontas district, really. And this place has to be seen to be believed. It's just unlike any place else in North America. With the demise of coal, it's really become run down. I believe we're in Ekman here, and up on the hill behind the engines is one of the many abandoned schools and other kinds of buildings you will find in this region. That's the school up on the hillside there. We're still in Ekman here, a train going east. And also at Ekman. Keystone is one of the very typical rundown towns you'll come across in this part of the country. This is a coal mine located just right outside of Keystone. This is McDowell County, West Virginia. You got to see it to believe it. This is Big Four Tunnel near Kimball, West Virginia. There's actually back-to-back tunnels here, but one of them is really accessible. You drive right up to it, like I did here. This would be a westbound train coming out of the Big Four Tunnel. And because you can drive right to it, it's easy to set up for night shots. Here's the Nickel Plate Road Heritage Unit coming out of Big 4 Tunnel. This was kind of cool. Here's that Norfolk Southern Heritage Unit again. It's actually in helper service, pushing the train into the tunnel. We were set up for this shot here, and as the train was going by us and the helpers were approaching us, as usual, we set off a heads up flash, just so the crew would know we were there. Well, as soon as we fired the heads up flash, I guess the helper engineer was watching in his rearview mirror, since he's sitting backwards as the train is pushing. Must have been watching his rearview mirror, saw the flash go off. He flipped on the headlights and ditch lights, so it looked like the train was coming at us, and then leaned out the window and gave us a wave. Here's Hemp Hill Tunnel. Norfolk Southern was behind in container traffic. It couldn't move, it couldn't compete with places like Baltimore and other places for cross-country containers needing to get shipped out into the Atlantic at Norfolk, because double stack containers wouldn't fit through the tunnels on the Pocahontas district. So they did a massive clearance project through here. And as you can see, the corner of the tunnel is notched. That's so double stack containers can go through the tunnel. They did this to many tunnels along the railroad, so they could access Norfolk more directly by going across the Pocahontas. We're at Rotor Field here. Typical Norfolk and Western practice, they had their engines set up to run long hood forward. Yes, and Sandy just pointed out in chat that actually Baltimore isn't very competitive still, because CSX has to deal with the Howard Street Tunnel in Baltimore, and they aren't really competitive. But there are other ports that were kicking NS's butt in container traffic, so they did the clearance project. This is still at Rotor Field. We're in Welch now. The Nickel Plate Heritage Unit is in helper service. Here's a light set of helpers going through town. Just ahead of it is a tunnel on a sharp curve that pops out on the other side of town. The highway has to go around the mountain. Tracks are a lot shorter through here than the highway. And here's the other end of that tunnel. It goes through the mountain and pops out onto this bridge here. And you can see how the houses are stacked on the hillside here. This is still in Welch. And the color position light signals. I shot as many of those as I could while they were still standing. And this is from the mountainside overlooking Welch. That bridge you see down there, the train is on, that's the same bridge you saw a couple of shots ago. The tunnel is just ahead of the train. So one day I was down in Welch, and Garland McKee had just written an article for Railfan magazine on the Pocahontas district. And the cover shot was a shot taken from here at Welch, the train on the bridge with the houses in the background. Well, I had to get that shot. That's the shot I wanted to get. So we pulled up here to the end of the bridge, and darn, there isn't this track work going on. And of course, the end of the bridge is full of maintenance people. So but I really wanted the shot. So I walked up to the foreman with a copy of the magazine in my hand. And I said, I said, I'm from New Jersey and I would really like to get this photo here. There's a train coming, if I could. Guy goes, oh yeah. He says, go stand by my truck. You should be able to get it from there. No problem. So that worked out. They were actually putting a little bit of elevation into the outside rail on the curve there on this day, just raising it so the bridge was slightly tilted for better speed around the curve here. Now we're over on the other side of West Virginia and another massive Norfolk and Western coaling tower. This is the one at Pritchard. These things here, even though they haven't been used since the 1950s, they still stand because they're too expensive to knock down, too disruptive to knock down. You have to close the railroad, and they really aren't going anywhere. They're made out of concrete. They're not going to go anywhere, so they just stay there. And we leave West Virginia in the town of Canova. Canova is the combination of the three states that meet here: Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia. So Canova. And here's a train coming out of Ohio and into West Virginia. So that's a little trip across the Pocahontas district. We're going to finish off the show with some current events, a couple of places I've been over the last few weeks. And we're going to start off at the Baltimore Streetcar Museum. The Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys is a group, obviously in Philadelphia, but their mission is to raise money to help preserve Philadelphia equipment at other museums, because there's no museum just of Philadelphia transit and railroads. So down in Baltimore, former SEPTA PCC number 2168 is there. So they've raised money over the years to restore the 2168. And it's painted in my favorite Philadelphia scheme, but we unofficially call it the Gulf Oil scheme because of the orange and blue. But they have what's called $25 days at different museums where there's Philly equipment under restoration. And the $25 days, you pay your $25. They run a lot of trolleys. You ride all day long, but also entitles you to run one of the cars if you want to. So I got to run the PCC. Here we see the PCC meeting a former Philadelphia snow sweeper. The Baltimore Streetcar Museum has had two things going against it over the last year and a half. Obviously, COVID being one of them. The other problem is the road they're located on, Falls Road, is under heavy construction and is officially closed. That means they haven't run a trolley down here in almost 2 years, other than this was the first time they were out in quite a while. What it has done is allow the right-of-way to grow up a little bit, and now you get shots of what looks like streetcars in their final days when the maintenance was way down in the 40s and 50s. Here we see a Baltimore PCC. Here's 2168 at the end of the line on the loop. Very cool paint scheme. They got all kinds of equipment here at Baltimore. It's some really neat stuff. It had poured rain all the previous day into the morning of this day here. And everything was just saturated. Here we see the Baltimore PCC coming into the loop at the visitor center. One of the Friends members, a guy named Logan Tracy, he has his birthday party down here every year. and his party is used as a fundraiser for a particular streetcar. The streetcar he's raising funds for this year was the 3828, the car you see in the picture here. And they got one motor on it running for this day so it can move. And Logan wanted a pacing shot of the car in service. So he attached his GoPro camera to the car that I'm riding on here. And the operator, Matt Non, he was instructed to stay about a car length behind the 3828 and pace along behind it to get video. So I took advantage of the pacing to get this shot here. Into the line, the two cars together, the car that we paced with and the 3828. And here they are coming back. CSX runs right over top of the visitor center at the Baltimore Streetcar Museum. And in fact, that substation down below with the graffiti on it is brand new because about 2 years ago, CSX derailed a freight on that bridge overhead and dumped a handful of coal cars onto the substation. And this is one of the oldest streetcars still running in the United States. Old Baltimore car, Baltimore City Passenger Railway Company. Oh, Sandy says they dumped flat cars and not coal cars, but anyhow, they dumped cars onto the museum. A couple weeks later, I went out to the where the heck was I? It'll come to me.
Walkersville Southern.
Thank you. Walkersville Southern. Oh, no, this is actually the same day. I finished up at Baltimore and headed out to the Walkersville Southern because the Gramlings, Barney and John Gramling, had one of their traveling steam locomotives out there running.
Yeah, they really need operators on those tractors, though.
Yeah, we thought of that later. But they had props set up. They had a little photo train began at 5 o'clock in the evening. And the 85 pulled the short freight train for photography. The railroad put this on themselves. And apparently this was a whole lot better than it had been in previous years. They did make some attempt at photo lines and photo props. And this was the first time that the 85 actually had freight cars behind it. Jetto Coal Company. The Gramlings own 2 operable steam locomotives that they can flatbed around to different railroads. So railroads that don't have steam power hire the Gramlings to bring a steam engine in for a weekend or two for steam weekends. And it's proven to be very popular. Highlight of the line is the bridge over the Monocacy River. They put on quite a show. The run was about 4.5 miles long. You got a tank engine, so you got to be careful on water. But the locomotive crew did a real good job at managing the water, and we were able to get in several photo run-bys over the course of the trip. There's Barney Gramling with his train in the background as it's backing up across the Monocacy. And this was the last run by the day. Down near the end of the line, you'll notice that our actor is actually carrying an Argus C3 camera, which he actually was using that day too. He had it loaded with film and was actually using it. Back up in Walkersville, they did some switching once they were back in, and a couple of run-bys. Neat little event from 5 until 8 o'clock in the evening. And then this past weekend, I headed out to Western Pennsylvania, out to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. And on the way, I stopped at the crest of the Alleghenies on the old Baltimore and Ohio main line at Sandpatch. Sandpatch has been fairly quiet of late, but I did get this eastbound train. Normally, I would cut clutter out of the foreground, but I thought that Conrail boxcar was kind of cool, so I included that in the photo. And then this westbound showed up. The tower at Sandpatch used to sit where that silver box is on the right-hand side with the satellite dish on it. I was out there one year in December, probably in the early 1990s. And short days, and there for the weekend. On Saturday at about 1 o'clock, I went up to the tower, knocked on the door, because back then you could do this kind of things. Knocked on the door, and the operator answered, and I said, "Any trains coming?" He goes, "Nah, not until after dark." I'm like, "Well, crap." I said, "I'm out here until I'm out here tomorrow too." He goes, "You like football?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Come on in." I spent the rest of the afternoon watching football with the operator in the tower. And then before I left, a third train showed up heading east. That evening, I was out to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum, and they were doing an all Philadelphia weekend. Once again, the Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys was having a $25 day there, same as at Baltimore a few weeks earlier, where you could ride unlimited trips and operate the trolleys as well. Here we see a couple of St. Louis cars that used to run on the Red Arrow division in Philadelphia between Upper Darby and Media and Sharon Hill. So they never actually operated in the city officially, but Philadelphia area. This is the museum stop at Fairgrounds. It's located next to the county fairgrounds, and they do a booming business on fair weeks because they have a huge parking lot at the other end of their line. And they park people there and run anything that can run as far as trolleys go, and just constantly shuttle people up to the fairgrounds. It's like regular trolley service back in the day. It's pretty impressive. It's kind of cool though, seeing the two old St. Louis cars together. I shot maybe not these exact cars, but when I first started taking pictures back in the late 70s and early 1980s, these cars were still in service on Red Arrow. So I did get the tail end of these in regular service, but it's kind of cool to see them. Next day, we're doing the all Philly $25 day. Here we see a Philly PCC, the 2711, passing the St. Louis car on the right, going away. This guy brought out his antique vehicle to park it by the tracks for a few shots. And for $25 day, I got to run the PCC, and I also ran St. Louis car 14. Here we see a Brill car, also ran on the Red Arrow lines, color coordinated with the automobile. This is that huge parking lot I told you about, where they could park 1 million cars and shuttle them to the fair. Went to the shop, and they have a shop dog. Every shop needs a shop dog or a shop cat. They got a shop dog. That's a Pittsburgh PCC sticking its nose out there, complete with the PCC wings around the headlight. And the Philly PCC. Another Philadelphia car. I'm not sure exactly which make and model this is. This is the loop at the they have loops at both ends of the line. The museum is actually mid ride. One loop down at the big parking area, and this loop up here in the woods. This loop here is really sharp. You can see the overhang of the car on the curve here. And the PCC doing the same turn. Our Brill car back at the museum. And then we did some night photos. Here's the Brill car with a Packard. And the St. Louis car. And our PCC. Next day, drove home. One shot I've always wanted to get was the street running on Main Street in West Brownsville, Pennsylvania, on the old Monongahela Railway, now Norfolk Southern. Actually, it's technically, I think, Conrail shared assets, but Norfolk Southern runs most of the trains here. And didn't wait very long before a train came up Main Street. The weather wasn't all that great, so I didn't do anything really bold and daring. I didn't like drive down any dirt roads or anything. I just did some simple stuff. So I'd head back to the west side of Sandpatch at Myersdale, Pennsylvania, and hung out there for a couple of hours. Got this eastbound train as soon as I pulled up. Then about 90 minutes later, I got a westbound train going past the old Baltimore and Ohio depot there. Just east of Myersdale is Keystone. This eastbound train showed up almost like a half an hour behind the one I shot in Myersdale. And then before he cleared, this westbound showed up. So that is going to wrap up the slideshow. Next show will be July 21st, 4 weeks from tonight. Thank you all for watching.